Hi, Katie.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Oh, okay. I'm not gonna turn on my camera for a second because I am sticky and gross.
Oh no, I'm so sorry. I've been sick too.
Oh, I'm sorry. That's what Anne said.
Yeah. I don't know what is like why this happens. Because I am the host. I can see that I'm the host, but like I can't, it says on our website that like hosts can't register. And then like I'm not able to get into it. So I'm like, oh no, like what do I do? Like
Yeah.
how did you get in?
Pam sent me all of these links, but she sent them like all at once a while ago. And so I was trying to go.
So we are going to start recording. And I'm going to start sharing my screen. Welcome, everybody. Can you all hear me? Just making sure you can hear me. Great. Okay. All right. You're going to see a different screen here. Just to make sure everybody can see that. Can you give me a thumbs up?
Yes.
Great. Thanks, Allie. Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's workshop. We're going to be talking about specifications grading. So it's really just an alternative system that you can use in your class for grading instead of the traditional grading system. So really practically based, very pragmatic. And I love discussing this system. I think it gives instructors a lot of options for their grading. And even if you don't want to implement the whole thing, you can just take parts and pieces from it too. So just to introduce myself really quickly, my name's Catherine Pagano, but I go by Kat. So you can call me Kat. And I am a higher education instructional consultant here at CTE. And also, I know this workshop's only 60 minutes, but this is a lot of information. It's kind of a complicated topic to get your mind wrapped around. So I just want to let you know, first and foremost, that beyond the confines of this workshop, I'm very, very happy to meet with anybody individually. If you'd like to talk about this, if you'd like to discuss implementing it in your specific classroom, I'm more than happy to do that. So I'm quite excited about this framework and to share it with you. Okay, so just a little outline for the day. What we're going to talk about first is just grading now, which is what most of us use as the traditional grading system. And then I want to give a brief on what specs grading is and who's using it right now. What does the research say about it? How are they using it? So what's going on in a few different fields? And then I'm going to present to you the actual framework, and then some guidelines and rules about specs grading, and then of course some time for questions. So I just want to be upfront that everything I'm presenting is not my idea. Everything comes from the book Specifications Grading by Linda B. Nelson. And I highly recommend reading it. Also, though, there's a lot of great research out that has been done on this system and the efficaciousness of this system in different fields, for different class sizes, for how many TAs you might have, and et cetera. So again, I'm just really reiterating what Linda B. Nelson has done in her book, Specifications Grading. Okay, so my hope for you today, again, this is a lot of information, is that you take something with you. Again, it might not be that you remember the whole system, right? But maybe it's going to be an idea or a concept that you didn't have before you came in here. So whatever it is, I hope that you feel at liberty to, stop me and ask questions. Please feel free to unmute or share your thoughts in the chat. Somebody from CTE will come in and answer that, or if they can't, then we'll try to answer it at the end. Either way, though, I just love that we all get to be here and share knowledge together, whether it's about something that's going wrong or something that's going right. Either way, like I absolutely love hearing it. And I do really like talking about grading systems and how they're working for you and especially your students. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about grading now. So the first thing I want to ask all of you, and please feel free to share this in the chat or unmute, is how is the grading system that you have now, the traditional grading system, which is, A to E, point-based system, like how is it right now assessing your students' progress? So start thinking about that. How does going into an assignment, let's say it's a writing assignment, and oh, they didn't do so well here, they didn't do so well there. Maybe you have a rubric, maybe you don't. Maybe you take some points off because they're really not very good at spelling. Maybe they missed a question. How many points do you take off? How does this start to make you think about the progress that your students make? So another question we want to ask is, what about learning? So how does the traditional grading scale assess learning? Is it through the feedback that we give our students, for example? Is it through just our lectures? How do we know? How are we checking for it? How is taking points and giving points actually assessing the learning that's going on? And what do you like about the traditional system? It's so funny, I call it traditional. We've used it forever though, right? Even when we were in like 6th or 7th grade, like we've always known this system. It's so familiar to us. I feel cozy with it. Like, oh, I just know this. Nobody has to explain anything to me. And then our next question is, what do you dislike? So I'm just going to give you about a minute to talk a little bit in the chat, or again, unmute. And I'd love to hear, like, if you want to answer any one of these, like, what do you like about it? What don't you like about it? How is it assessing your learning or learning for your students?
Kat, can you hear me?
Yes.
This is Jennifer. I would have to agree with you. I do feel cozy with the traditional system that we've learned, and I think that's why I've struggled to make changes in my class. But I think when you were asking these questions, I thought about the rubrics that I do use. I think in an organizational sense make sense in how I'm organizing it. But then when I'm going to give student feedback, it gets a little bit convoluted, and I feel like I spend time on, like taking a point here, there, and it's leveled across the class, but it comes back to the learning. Like I'm thinking, okay, are they're still learning something here, but it seems like the minutia of it gets so lost in when I'm going to put information into the rubric, and then there's the debate back and forth. Sometimes even students will approach us and say, well, I shouldn't have lost this 1 point or something. And that just you lose the value of the assignment at that point. And I think it's a frustration of a lot of faculty. We're like, but we just want you to learn something. But the way we have our evaluation set up, it is taking away from that.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, Jennifer, where when a student comes to you and says, well, why did I lose this point, or why did I lose that point? Because the nature of that question is not focused on learning, right? The nature of that question is focused on points, right?
Mm-hmm.
So then it's interesting to think about, well, what if we just take points away? Is there a way that we can just throw points away and direct a system where students can just start learning, right? Where maybe they come to us. How do we direct them to come to us with a question about the learning instead of the points? No, you bring up a really good point. Really good point.
And I think at least in the College of Nursing right now, we're switching to a competency-based education platform. So I think that like a different grading system where points are not the focus aligns really nicely with what's going on in a lot of health professional curricula right now. So I'm really curious to hear more.
Great. I love that. And I think this system can be implemented across, many fields, but it might be particularly useful in some where we need to make sure that students actually know something, right? That they can prove a competency.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing this with us.
Yeah, of course. Anybody else, feel free to drop comments in the chat. Okay, let's talk about what this actually is. If you haven't been to this workshop or you haven't heard of specs grading before, let's dive in. So I love this quote by Linda B. Nelson, and I'm going to read it to you really quickly because it really gives a good framework for what this system is. So in the current grading system, we are not expected to lay out the grading template in such detail, so we don't. And our students do not always pay careful attention to the sketchy instructions they get. Besides, they can bank on partial credit for just making a weak attempt. No wonder the quality of the work they submit varies radically. We are willing to accept or settle for and give partial credit to work that falls short of what we define as good. In fact, we spend hours judging how much partial credit to give and writing explanations of each student's errors and omissions to justify our subtracting of points. It's exhausting, right? Well, where did they get this or where did they not? Another great point that Dr. Nelson brings up is we're willing to accept or settle for this partial credit. And also we allow our students to make this weak attempt, right? Because we're not setting a standard that they either have to meet or not meet because they're like, well, I can submit this assignment and maybe just get a few points for it. So here's some really just very bullet pointed lists of or guidelines of what specifications grading is. So it's competency based. So it's no longer point based, it's competency based. That means that students have to prove that they've met certain competencies in order to pass certain assignments. So they have to meet these criteria based learning objectives. So learning objectives are tied to rubrics, and then rubrics are based on pass fail, which means there's either credit or there's no credit. And what's great is that with this system, you can offer students the opportunity to revise. Personally, I like to give alternate assignments. For example, if a student feels that they don't like a writing assignment, okay, that's fine. Create a podcast for me or create a presentation. Show me in some other way that you know how to apply or create or whatever this knowledge. And the great thing about this system too is that you can modify it. You don't have to adopt the whole thing. A lot of instructors like to just adopt one assignment from it. Okay, so with that, let's look at a little bit of the research and what other instructors or researchers are doing with specs grading, because I think that helps to paint a good picture. So here's an article by Leslie and Lundblom, and I really like their general overview of what Linda B. Nelson has done. And this is right from their article. Traditional point-based grading is failing students entering a competency-based workforce. Back to what Jennifer said, if we have students that go right into a workforce, it's not about this grade, right? It's not about high points or whatnot. Like you either need to demonstrate that skill or not. And here's a great outline of the basic components of this system. So it has to do with meeting these specific learning objectives, bundles of assignments. It's competency-based, learning-based, right? And everything is pass-fail. So it's either credit or no credit. So there's no more like, well, out of 10 points, it was 9.5 and etc. So let's look at a couple of specific fields that some research has been done with specifications grading. Here's one in an organic chemistry class. I think this is really interesting because the writers of this article had many TAs. They had over 35 TAs for this class, which is a lot. Huge class, and students and TAs alike were asked open-ended questions at the end of the semester to sort of get a feel of how they like the system. And first of all, these authors are saying that the traditional system, point-based rubrics lead to a lot of this TA grading that is variable, right? There's not a whole lot of consistency, and that's why curving is needed. When they asked the TAs how they felt about it, they really liked it because they felt like it reduced the time that they had to spend giving points or taking points. And overall, it was less ambiguous. Now, students thought a little bit differently. They were a little bit mixed and thought that in order for this system to be really successful on a larger scale, instructors would really need to make clear what this system means and how the specifications work, which makes total sense, right? This is a very foreign system to a lot of students and instructors. So if you have students that have taken classes all the way up until they've met you and they've never encountered anything other than the traditional grading system, this can be really overbearing. So really being transparent with our students is important. And finally, here's an article based on a dietetics course. Again, qualitative interviewing happened at the end of the course to see how students and instructors felt about it. And this is kind of what came of it, that successful implementation of the system requires a lot of clear communication, especially of the assignment expectations. So being really upfront. So this system does take a lot of work upfront. And it also really needs to be, headed home that it's okay to make revisions, that students have the opportunity to make revisions. And because students are often really unfamiliar with this system, again, it's really important that we're transparent with them about the system up front. So what does this all mean? It means that we really do need to make sure that we are upfront about the system. We may need to take more time at the beginning of the semester to explain what the system means and be really transparent about how it works. Now, one way I like to do this with students is making sure that the first assignment is really low stakes, for example, really quite easy, and allowing students to kind of get their feet wet in this system, especially if they've never had it before or been exposed. Okay, so let's dive into like this actual framework. Like, what is the specifications grading framework? So there are a couple components to the framework. The first one is starting with the outcomes. So you might already be retrieving some knowledge of, well, when we start with outcomes, it kind of sounds like we're starting from like a bigger picture. Yeah, you're kind of stepping backwards into this course. So the first thing you want to establish is what it is that you want your students to know. So these are going to be your learning objectives. With specifications grading, your outcomes are really specific, and you actually have outcomes tied to each grade. Okay, so A through D, you have outcomes. You have specific learning objectives tied to each one, because remember, grades are now tied to competencies. They're now tied to learning instead of tied to points. Okay, so from your outcomes, you're going to start building in your assessments. Like what are these and how do they fit? How do they tie into my outcomes? Then you're going to look at how those assessments tie into your grades. Oops, screen's going a little wonky. And then how your grades are actually going to go into your grading process. So I just want to see if there's any questions. I'm going to open up the chat really quickly. Let's see. Ashton, how do you communicate changes to grading? I've tried explaining my grading strategy to students and they freak out about how they translate this into a traditional point-based grading. Ashton, did you want to unmute and tell me a little bit more? Or we can afterwards. Okay, that's fine. I can maybe help address that because I have a few questions about that. I think if this is implemented at the very beginning and you explain the framework to your students from the beginning, I haven't had any trouble with it. But I can walk through the grading process, how it's actually graded, and I think that might help answer your question. Okay, let's move on. So first, we're going to talk about outcomes. Okay, so I know this looks like a lot, like, wow, what are all those boxes? But I'm going to really simplify it for you. Okay, so first of all, we are still assigning grades. I mean, we have to. We can't get away without assigning like an A to an E, especially at the University of Utah, right? That's just how our system works. But either way, we can still make sure that all of these grades, all of these letters are tied to outcomes instead of points. So what I've demonstrated here is you can see in the A box, there's demonstrate, apply, explain, create, critique. And as we go along the scale here, there's sort of less learning outcomes that students need to grasp or need to know in order to obtain a lower grade. Now, as you can see on the left side, there's maximum course engagement, and on the right side, there's minimum course engagement. So when I'm presenting this system to my students at the beginning of the semester, I want them to know that if they get an A in my class, they have demonstrated maximum course engagement. That means that they have been involved and have participated to the maximum in my class, that there's really nothing else they could have done in order to exceed that, other than maybe their own personal offshoots from material presented in class or assignments that they've done. So let's talk a little bit more specifically. So if students want to get an A in the class, they need to demonstrate this advanced knowledge. And of course, I've made this specific to this workshop. So of specs grading framework, they need to show advanced proficiency when applying, right? So I have those action words from Bloom's taxonomy in here. They need to display that mastery. They need to create this. They need to produce. You can see these are quite robust, right? They're quite robust. And if students fulfill these, right, they're going to get an A. Now let's take a quick look at a B. So as you can see, the students are still doing well, right? They're still proficient. They're still doing well. They're still achieving. However, they're not required to, let's say, exhibit so much proficiency at a high level. Now, I know this is a little like, well, what's going on? I don't quite understand. It'll all come together, I promise. As we go on through the scale, you can see that students, to get a C, they don't need to meet as many of these learning objectives. Now, I want to interject my own train of thought here and let you know that instructors I've worked with have come to me very concerned, saying, well, I'm really concerned that my students aren't going to, experience or get a taste of all these learning objectives, right? Because if they get a C, like, for example, they don't have to create or critique anything. And I'm really worried about that because like they need to be able to do that, right? I'm like, well, yeah, they do, but they're only getting a C. And like, a C is okay. And they've still done a lot of work in your class to get that C, but they haven't gone above and beyond, right? Now, the catch here with the points is that students might do every assignment that might graze over every learning objective. Okay. But if they're just sort of doing this half-baked effort for all of those assignments, can we really say that they ever learned anything? That's a question that we need to mull over as instructors. Okay, now let's take a look at the last one, which is a D. And Ds aren't very good, right? But students don't need to do a whole lot to get a D. They don't need to do a whole lot in the traditional system, and they don't need to do a whole lot in the specs grading system either. Okay, so this is again just to show you that we're making these learning objectives very, very specific, right? And we're now tying an A to E grade to each of them. And an A grade is going to show that students have maximally engaged in the course and met those objectives, or they've minimally engaged and probably haven't. Okay, let's talk a little bit about grades now. Now, everything here is hypothetical. However, if I were to build a course on specs grading itself, some of these assignments would probably be in it. I just want to let you know that I have exams here on the left. As you can see, I don't give exams in my classes right now, but I know they're a very popular assessment method for instructors, so I've just put them in here, and I will discuss them for the purposes of many instructors using them. So as you can see on here, these are the assignments for this class. So there's one final project. There's a research paper that has 4 sections. There's class activities / homework. There's 14 of those. And then I'm going to give 2 exams. Now, if we kind of move in, we can see again, there's a maximum course engagement and there's a minimum course engagement. So let me show you this fun pyramid. Now, as you can see here, at the top, students, if they want to get an A, they have to do everything in the B category, which is below the A, and then they just have to pass the final project. Now, at the end of the semester, I have students come to me often and they say, well, I I don't know if I want to do this final project. I don't really know if I want that A. And I'm like, that's totally fine. You get to choose, right? This is what I love about the system is it acts more like a menu rather than you do some work and then, hold tight and receive a grade from me. Everything is spelled out right here. So if students don't want to get an A, they don't have to do the final project at the end of the semester. End of semester can be really exhausting, and they can opt in for a B. Now, one thing I really like to do is give a variety of assignments, especially in the class activities and homework, for example, but never saying that they have to pass all of them, right? So there's like 2 assignments here that they can always, kind of get out of jail free. Maybe they're sick or maybe something's going on and they're not able to complete those. So I always give them some options there. For exams, to get a B, they have to pass both exams with an 80%. Now, that's just the guideline that I've made. Maybe in your class, you feel that it's higher than that the standard is higher. Maybe it's a 90%. And then for the papers, I say you need to pass 3 out of the 4. Now, as we go down in this pyramid, if students decide that they would like to get a C or a D, they just do less work, right? They pass less work. What's great about this system, though, is that the assignments that they do pass are going to have to meet a standard. Remember, this is pass fail. So there's no a little bit of credit here, a little bit of credit there. They either have to pass it or fail it. And we make those criteria very explicit in the assignment details and in our rubrics. So I just want to stop here for a second and see if there's any questions, because I know this is a lot of information. Yeah, Adam. Hi, how's it going?
Hello, good. I thank you, Kat.
Yeah.
And I'm still struggling.
Sure.
I've tried this a couple times, and my biggest hurdle is the following example.
Okay.
Students like this.
Mhm.
I like it.
Oh.
But at the end of the semester, using your example here, they say let's look at the B thing.
Yeah.
They meet number 1, they meet number 2. Basically, they pass everything, all their activities, all their homework. They ace all the exams,
Great.
but they only pass 2 out of the 4 research paper parts.
Okay. Are you giving them an option to when you pass it back and you say, hi student, for example, you didn't pass this. So, before the end of the semester, please turn this back into me, revised, and show me where you've corrected, and maybe explain to me where you've made your mistakes. Are you giving them an option to revise?
Not for that specific example, no.
Oh, okay. Okay. I think so. You've brought up a great point, Adam, a really, really great point. And hopefully, though, we don't get to the end of the semester and realize that we're in this very betwixt and between scenario. So I like to give 7 days before. So when an assignment is turned in, give 7 days, for you to grade or for your TAs to grade. And when students are notified that they haven't passed that assignment, it's sent back to them with explicit instructions of how they can modify that assignment. And then I like to give to the end of the semester. Here's what I found out, though, with students. Students hate revising their work. They hate revising it because revisions take a lot of time and they take a lot of effort, because not only do they have to go back and find out where they went wrong, they actually have to explain to me how they went wrong. So it takes a lot of effort, right? But they need to know up front, right at the beginning of the semester, that if they're in this predicament, that they're going to fall into the next category.
I appreciate this, Kat. I need to
help?
work better a way for them to revise. If we flipped my scenario where all the research papers are good and whatnot, but they didn't pass the exams,
Yeah.
or the homework, again, they're in between. They're like, what? I did all this other work. I should get it. It's just this one thing. Well, it's the
Yeah.
lowest thing. Here's the menu. You knew about it. Unfortunately, I haven't figured out how to make some of my assignments and the exams redoable.
Oh, okay, okay. Yeah,
I'm physics, and there's like correct answers or not. And
right,
so as opposed to just coming up with a new assignment for every person on every chapter
yeah,
as another option to try again, I don't know what else to try. But
okay. Okay, in my experience, what I've done is when they have not met the 80% mark or whatever benchmark I've made that at, I give it back to them and I give them a separate set of instructions that says for each answer that you answered incorrectly, please, you now
okay,
have a chance to answer this in an open-ended way.
gotcha.
And you need to explain to me like what was your train of thinking before, right? We're really getting into it now. What was your train of thinking before when you answered it? Now that you have the correct answer, like how have you figured out that this is the correct answer? How does this make sense? Illustrate to me that you can tie these connections together. This is an opportunity for them to probably learn more than if they had just passed it to begin with, right? Which is,
I like this. I can probably incorporate that. What I like about all this is the students get to choose.
yeah,
And if they want to put forth the effort, we're giving them an opportunity one way or another. At least I'm trying to. That's my hurdle. And then
right.
it's up to them. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, the autonomy, right? Because if we give them more autonomy over their own learning, I think that creates this atmosphere of like agency, right? I can take control over this, and I don't need to get an A because I don't have to do that final project. Matt, how's it going?
Great, how are you? Thanks for
Good.
doing this. So I
Yeah.
have two questions. One might be similar to Adam, and it has to do with a logic course I teach, which is kind of like a math class. But the first question I have is about what you've got here. So I tried a specifications grading approach last semester, and it was, in a lot of ways, I loved it. But
Great.
I felt like I ended up grading based on engagement rather than quality. And so I had a really motivated class, which was good. And almost everybody got an A because they did all the assignments, which was great. And they were kind of hitting those standards.
Okay.
But I don't have a problem giving everyone an A in a class if they've all earned it.
Yeah.
But what I had a hard time with was the students that really excelled didn't distinguish themselves in the grade in a way that when they come back and ask me, for example, for a letter of recommendation.
Mhm.
And I worried the class became a little too easy and a little too much based on, are you grading based on engagement rather than quality? And I'm not sure how to tweak my assignment that way. And then real quickly, for logic, it was a similar question to Adam that I wonder if there's help on building infrastructure. So a logic class looks like a math class in a lot of ways.
Okay.
And what I could easily imagine, like kind of giving these levels and telling students, if you can do this kind of proof, you'll get an A because it's stepwise. And if you get to this level, you get B, this level, you get to a C. But I
Okay.
can't create individual exams for every student over and over again. It's
Right.
just too much work. And I'm wondering if there's infrastructure or help we can get to build that into Canvas, for example. But I don't know how to do that.
Okay.
So
Yeah, no, you've made a great point. I guess my first question is, do you feel that the rigor of your class, do you feel like it's rigorous enough? For example, are your learning objectives for your class, are they rigorous enough, and are they appropriate for your students' learning level, whether it's a junior or senior, or for example, a first year class? And a great example of that, Matt, would be that passing both exams at 80%, like what kinds of questions are you asking? How are these questions being presented? What information are you asking your students to present, and how are they articulating it to you? Is 80% for my exam really high, and for yours, is it a little easier to obtain? This is something that I think takes some finagling. And as you mentioned, building or maybe scaffolding this within Canvas can also be difficult. It can also be difficult to explain the system to students in Canvas, which is why I recommend to instructors creating a video where you share your screen and go over it. But you also mentioned though that you do participation based points.
Well, so the two classes are really different. So logic is really, really hard. 80%, if students get above an 80%, they're probably doing really well.
Oh,
I haven't tried specification grading in my logic class because I think I actually know how to do it. I just don't know practically how to implement it, because it's too much. It would be so much effort to, it would require giving students multiple chances to go through exams and generating that many problem sets. I can imagine setting up on Canvas, and I think I've seen this actually, where I have a problem bank that Canvas could randomly draw from, and students would have to successfully complete different levels and progress through over the course of a semester.
oh, I see.
But I don't have time to do that or the skill to create that. The
Yeah.
other class is it's a bioethics class. I don't have exams in there. That really is really participatory with a lot of writing and shorter assignments. But the challenge there was just the opposite. So where logic is really, really hard,
Yeah.
bioethics, the students were really engaged. I was really happy with how it all turned out. And I think they did a great job demonstrating the learning objectives.
Oh, great.
But I don't know how to, I kind of want to make it harder. And it seemed with almost everyone getting an A, you don't get that. I mean, I don't care if everyone gets an A, it's great, but
Sure.
I could see differences in the students that weren't coming out in the grades. So the really top students weren't really distinguishing themselves because the grading system wasn't allowing them to do that.
I see. Okay. Okay. So, whereas, and let's just play devil's advocate for 1 second. If you were in a traditional based grading scale, do you feel that points would be illustrating better those students that got those A's? You think it would be illustrating their competency or their knowledge a little bit better?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, because meeting the specifications, even when I tried to have pretty rigorous specifications, crossing that threshold is different than excelling. It's that fine point, right? They're doing well and they're good versus this is a really excellent student. And in the traditional system, it was that excellence, that really top level, those are the students that ended up earning A's.
I see.
And they still are, but the other students are getting higher grades, which, maybe that's fine. But then when I go back and try to write a letter of recommendation, it's more challenging because I can't say things like, this person was in the top 5% of my class.
Okay.
Or if I'm trying to decide who gets to do a research project with me,
Yeah.
the grades are no longer filtering out who the top students are in the same way.
Yeah. Okay. You bring up another really good point, which is how do we identify students that are outstanding with this system, because it is pass fail. Well, as instructors, that's where we need to look at their work critically, right? Because even though they're passing, right, and they're meeting these objectives and they're getting this choice, we can still reward them. And hopefully, this is the goal, is that we reward them with our comments, with saying, this is outstanding. You've done outstanding work. I want to encourage you to take this a step further and work with me individually on a project or with something research-based, right? We can still identify that. And hopefully in the rubric, with saying that, yes, that did pass, here's why it passed, here's why it's doing really, really well. Really helping students to see that we are recognizing that they're doing outstanding. And I know that there's sort of like concrete levels to this, right? It almost seems like brutalistic in some, like a brutalistic architecture of a pyramid here. But I think rewarding or letting students know that they're doing outstanding comes from the individual comments on the rubrics, if that helps. But it sounds like also you're still playing with this system, which I think is great. Let me see, Lacey, I want to be careful of just time. I think we're good, but we can. Lacey, did you have a question?
I did, and it seems like my question, some of the people in the chat have the same concerns. So I was just wondering what your class sizes were for being able to give regrades. This is something that I tried to do my very first year, and I severely underestimated the amount of grading and effort that went into it, and I completely buried myself. So I have switched from open-ended questions and allowing regrades to multiple choice questions, which are also not the greatest at assessing competency or understanding. But part of that came out because I could not keep up with the grading. I could not give valuable and timely feedback in order for that to actually be a useful tool to the students. So just wondering, like, how do you scale this for larger class sizes and make this make sense?
Yeah. So what are your class range sizes, Lacey?
So my very first year, we only had 26 students, and I found that to be overwhelming. And now we're upwards of 40 and 50. We're growing our program, which is something that we want. But I do find that to limit the types of assessment exercises that I can offer my students, because I just am one person.
Yeah, you're right. Regrading assignments is exhausting too. With the help of TAs, and I'll have I have a cited resource page at the end, and you can look into some of the articles there, or I can send them to you. For example, organic chemistry class, right? Where there can be hundreds of students at most of the time, especially at bigger universities. So one aspect is having TAs, right? For substantially bigger classes. Now, in my experience with this system, what I found is that when students know, when they understand this system, and it's very transparent to them, they hate redoing their work, because redoing their work takes a lot of time and takes a lot of effort. So, and this is just, again, what I've experienced through using this system, is that students, they don't often send me something that isn't very good to begin with, because they know that it's not going to pass. And I've made that very explicit at the beginning of the semester by giving them like some sort of easier assignments and showing them what they need to do to pass. So that's really helped me with the regrading. I haven't had to do a lot of regrading. But I think that's a great question. I'm just going to check the chat really quickly. Let's see. Revise and explain is a lot of effort per student per assignment. How does that scale to courses with 100+ students? Again, I'm hoping that if you do have over 80 students, that you have TAs in your classes, because that is a lot to teach if you're one instructor, especially if you have a 3-3 or 4-4 load to begin with. Revising and resubmitting, if you make those standards very explicit, again, students don't like to turn in that work again. And to reiterate something that Adam said before, I get to the end of the semester, right? And it's like, well, you're going a whole grade lower because you didn't revise this one assignment. That's something at the beginning that if you're very transparent with your students, like, this has to be in by the end of the semester, or, in etc., whatever rule you want to make around that can really help foster that. Now, here's another option. Don't allow students to revise. Instead of allowing revisions, give, for example, those class activities, give 14 and say you only need to pass 12, but there are no revisions. So that might help absolve you from that regrading. Another thing you could do with this system is, for certain assignments, say, yes, you can revise this assignment. And for those assignments that's going to take you a lot of time to regrade, you could say, with this assignment or these types of assignments, I'm not allowing for revisions. I hope that helps.
Thank you.
Okay. I can also answer more questions at the end. Okay, let's just move on so I can show you some assignments, some of these actual assignments and how they sort of integrate right into your learning objectives. So here's an exam. And again, I've framed everything with this around the actual specs grading framework. And this is comprised of short answer questions, hypothetical scenarios. And as you can see here, I have put in the learning objectives from the first slide in the framework that I showed you all. I'm just putting these right in here. I put them right into the assignment, but right in the assignment, you know, if I have my assignment on my Canvas or whatever, right below it, you can create a box and you can say, if you pass this assignment, you will have demonstrated knowledge of the SPECS grading framework. You have applied principles of the SPECS grading framework to your class, and you'll explain the 4-step SPECS grading, you know, framework process. Put that right into the assignment. Tell your students the objectives that they're meeting if they pass this assignment. Okay, let's look at one more. So here's one of these class activities. And this is, you know, a pretty easy assignment that I would give to somebody that's taken my SPECS grading class. You know, just choosing one assignment type, providing a short assignment description, state 2 to 3 learning objectives that students will fulfill by completing the assignment. And then state some criteria, very outlined, detailed criteria of what students will need to do in order to pass the actual assignment. Again, we have to tie this all the way back to our learning objectives. Okay, we always tie it back. We always restate what those are. So students are knowing and making those connections of the actual learning, right? Because we're not talking about points anymore. So again, demonstrating that knowledge, applying those principles, and then this is going to show the creation of one assignment using the SPECS grading framework. Okay, and then this isn't a very outlined rubric, but it's just showing you in Canvas, you can do marks or no marks. Okay, you can give credit or no credit. Now, again, the standard with all of this is a little bit higher, right? Because we don't just start giving out points for, well, it was okay, right? Or yeah, half credit because, you know, you answered half of it, but you forgot this portion. We say you forgot this portion, so you didn't pass this part, okay? And maybe also you can say that's okay, because maybe you only need to pass 3 out of the 4 criteria to pass the assignment, okay? And that's something I love about SPECS grading, is that it's so modifiable. Okay, let's talk a little bit about guidelines or rules. I've peppered these in throughout our discussion here, but I want to just reiterate a few of them because it's so important to know what you can do with this system and how it works and how it can work for you. Remember, each class is very individual, each discipline is, so it's going to take some modifying. So I love this illustration by Captain Hector Barbosa from Pirates of the Caribbean. You know, he says the code is more what you call guidelines than actual rules, okay? So I think with this system, making it transparent to your students that you've created this system in a way that like works for this class, you know, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily applicable to all their other classes. And that could be a downfall of this system, right? Is that it's not fluid through everybody else's teaching methods, learning modalities, or assessments. So here are a few. As far as your assessments goes, you can revise and resubmit to pass or, you know, or not pass. Another thing I like to tell students is, hey, you know what, you didn't pass this, but maybe don't worry about revising it, because, you know, you've got, you know, 12 others that you can do. So just let this one go. Or if you'd like to revise it, you can. Again, you can take the revision policy away if you feel like it's going to be maybe too much work. So they can also skip those assignments. You give them a few more assignments than they actually need. I like to give alternative assignments, right? So if students, for example, for a final project, maybe not just assigning a paper, here, write me a paper, give them the option to do a podcast, a presentation, a poster to demonstrate in some other way their knowledge of it. And then there's a lot of opportunity for you to create different rules with this system according to your class and according to what you feel might work for your system here. Okay, so we're going to kind of look at the forest now through the trees. Is SPECS grading worth it? Because this system, as you can tell, it does take a lot of time up front, right? It's going to take more time than just, of course, recycling your traditional system, but also critically thinking about the type of students that you have in your class. And then what sort of assessments you feel like need to happen in order for your students to really gain the knowledge or the overarching objectives that you're trying to implement and trying to have your students learn. So I love this illustration because that square wheel is sort of demonstrating what we're doing right now, right? Now it's working, right? But on the other hand, would specs grading, ask yourself critically, would it be a little bit more efficient? And what is the point of having students in class? Like, especially when it comes to those discussions of, well, where did I miss this point? Or where did I miss that point? Or maybe I can just give a sort of half-baked effort on all these assignments to get a C without really learning much of anything. So it's really important for us to ask, what is it that we want them to learn? Where is the focus in our classes? And maybe from an even broader, bigger picture, what is it that upholds the merit of a college degree? And the first thing that comes to my mind is learning, right? Is learning, and maybe practical skills, application-based skills. Maybe I can give my students some sort of artifact so they can walk out of my class and become a nurse or become, a physician or become a physicist or whatnot, right? What are these hard skills, and how do I assess that they're ready to go out and do those things? Okay, so just to review some benefits from research and then also from what I've experienced is that autonomy, right? So students look at that pyramid and especially at the end of the semester, they say, well, how am I toggling between these grades? What do I want for myself? And it also gives them a little bit more transparency when it comes to what kind of work do I want to do? When do I want to do this work, right? Do I want to skip this assignment because I've got 14 out of 12, or do I want to save it to the end of the semester? Again, we're allowing them to make these decisions instead of us making these decisions. Fostering inclusivity because it gives them that autonomy, right? Providing those really clear expectations, especially in your rubrics of this is what's passing and this is what's not passing. Giving them work, giving them maybe an example assignment of what looks like passing and what doesn't look like passing, instead of just grading that assignment and giving it back to them like, here it is, surprise, right? Reducing the subjectivity, right? Because instead of taking a point here or a point there, it's either pass or fail. And what I really love is the intimate tying of learning objectives to the assessments, because everything is competency based, right? It's all based on the objectives that you've set for the class. Okay, so just to tie up here, here's a QR code. I would love your feedback on this survey. And we have just about 8 minutes for questions. I know that the system comes with a lot of questions like, how does this work or how does that work? So I want to give plenty of time for questions, but I would love your feedback. In just a few minutes, I will also post a link in the chat. Yeah, Matt, I'd love to hear from you. And also I'd love to hear from you via email. If you'd love to email me, set up an appointment, we can talk. Matt, yeah, I'd love to hear from you.
Yeah, so I want to share a solution a student shared with me
Yeah.
to my problem of it being too easy. So when I always tell the students up front, I think this might respond to some of the other questions too. Beginning of the semester, I tell the students that I adopt what I call an open source teaching, which is I pull back the curtain and I let them, and I hope that they will help contribute to how I teach both this term and in the future.
Mm-hmm.
One idea I had that was a really good idea is instead of having a set of assignments that everyone does, and you kind of hinted at, you suggested this. The idea was have 100 points that your grade is based on, but have a lot more assignments available than just those 100 points. And so part of what I'm going to do is require 20% of the grade will be things I need everyone doing every week. But then I think what I'm going to try to do next semester is have a whole set of assignments students can select from, and they can decide how they want to build up to that 100 points and how far they get. And I can then include some that are easier, so and require less engagement, and some that are going to be much more challenging and much more difficult. Some of them will be group projects if they want to do that, but they don't have to. And that way, I think if I start tweaking that way, I can start building a course that will be more challenging to get that A, and the students that get those A's, more students can get it, but it'll really reflect something more meaningful than what happened last time I tried it. So just wanted to share one solution or one idea I got from my students.
Yeah, I love that. And I am familiar with other grading systems too, Matt. For example, ungrading has become really popular. I have not implemented it, and I've not done a lot of research on ungrading. However, I know that it's again not based on critiquing students as much as giving them the autonomy to assess their own work and assess each other's work. So that's another option. But no, I love that. I think that's a great idea, giving maybe like more low stakes assignments and then maybe high stakes assignments. And I mean, high stakes and low stakes as in, they're worth more points or less points, but giving students the option to choose those. I think that's great. Let's see, Catherine, I see the hand up.
Yes, I have a question, I guess, and it's basic, just with regard to competency-based learning. We're a clinical program, it's a professional program, so we have competencies for the skills and that sort of thing. When you're talking about competency-based with regard to the more cognitive aspects or affective domains, do you define it by the learning objectives, and that's what competency-based means? Could you?
Yes. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's all, just define competency-based outside of the realm of, psychomotor skills.
Yeah. So instead of grading by points, we grade on competencies. So the competencies that I listed to begin with, like, for example, for an A, you're going to meet all these learning objectives. That's really the only way you get an A. So we're tying that letter to those competencies. Now,
competency is just meeting the learning objective as it's stated, right?
The learning objectives, yes.
Okay.
But to, I guess, reiterate Linda Nelson, or Dr. Nelson's, she calls this competency-based, right? Because because of the Bloom's taxonomy integration in this, which is like the applying, the understanding, like it meets like a competency, rather than a grade. Does that help to answer your question?
Yes. I just want to know, is it as simple as that, or am I missing something? Thank you.
No, it's as simple as that. Yeah. Instead of an A going to points and making all of our assignments point-based, an A goes to competencies, and competencies are listed in the assignment, and you either meet or you don't meet those competencies. Awesome. Yeah. Does anybody else have a question or any other comments?
There is one in the chat that Adam asked about Canvas, how you do this in Canvas.
To incorporate this in Canvas's gradebook. Okay. So the Canvas gradebook cannot tell you that your overall grade, can only act as a filing system of your individual accomplishments. Students will need to refer to the specifications grading system to determine their overall grade. Oh, okay, Adam. So I've done the same thing in Canvas. So either pass or fail, right? But then also, oh gosh, I didn't teach last semester and I'm not teaching this semester. So I need to like refresh myself on like, how does Canvas work? Or how did I use this when I use Canvas? So you can block assignments though, right? So you have one block for exams, you can have one block for research papers, and you can have a block for assignments or whatever else. And this is just an example. And then within those blocks, students can see their progress, right? So they can see like within that block, I've done 9 out of 14 assignments. I only need to do 12, right? So does that help to answer your question? And it is a little more nuanced, right? Because they do need to remember, okay, in order to pass this assignment, like I need to, there's an 80% level. That's what I need to meet. Okay, what are those objectives that I need to meet? Yes, I will. Yes, I will get a copy of these slides, and they will be emailed to you along with the survey that I put in the chat. So you will get a follow-up. You can program pass fail, and yes, you can program pass fail into Canvas. That's what I've done. It's like either it comes up as like a little red 0 or like a check. Joshua. Okay, I'm just going through the chat to see if I missed anything. Tracy, I'm so sad you missed the first part. So you'll get an email, Tracy, with the slides for this, and also a follow-up survey. Hopefully that'll help. Also, I'm losing my voice a little. I'm more than happy to meet with you individually. If you'd like to do this in your specific class, you'd just like to brainstorm maybe how this would work. A lot of instructors like to just try one assignment with specifications grading instead of like just overhauling everything at first, because it can be intimidating. And for sake of time, I know it's 12 o'clock and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So thank you so much for attending. It was so good to see you all. But also feel free to stick around if you have other questions. I'm more than happy to chat. Thanks, Matt. Thanks, Adam. Good to see you.
You too. Thanks, Kat.
Yeah, love your shirt. Oh, it's so great.
I needed some color today.
I know, it's been so gray.
I just applaud your bravery. I haven't been brave to do this every semester.
Yeah, it's such a, I think, contrast to the traditional system. I get it. I think just hearing about it or just picking up one more thing can be helpful.
When I share it with folks, most people I talk to prefer it.
Oh,
The concept, the idea, it's logistics. There's always something logistic that holds someone back, like the Canvas grade book or the one I ran into that I'm still working out, but getting
Yeah.
it smoother. But most people like the idea, so let's keep trying.
Yeah, and it makes sense, right? Because I think just looking at this presentation, it's like all these other things come to mind that it's hard to have time to talk about, like how do I do this in Canvas, or how would I have a discussion with my student about this, or how would I frame this for my particular class? I think Matt had some good questions because he's got, some classes that I've never even heard of, and I'm like, oh wow, we'd have to sit down and hash that out. So yeah, it's overwhelming.
I'll add, I haven't done it, but I've considered it.